Hello, everybody. My name is Al Graham, and you're with People Advocating Cannabis Education. PACE is about promoting the benefits of cannabis, which we do through educational documentaries and through public education. Today, we're talking to a cannabis advocate by the name of Jason Wilcox. Jason is involved with Cannabis in Canada, a website, the new MMAR proposals. We're going to talk about them, as well as a possible proposed lawsuit. So, hello, Jason. How are you?
Doing good, Al. Thanks. Just a little under the weather, but doing all good. Yeah, my name is Jason Wilcox. I've been a terminally ill patient for 20 years. 15 of those years, I've probably been in the cannabis activist movement area of social justice, moreover, in relation to medical marijuana. Sorry, my voice is going a bit on me. Going back to Cannabis in Canada, it's a website we started 7 years ago to educate medical cannabis growers on how to grow safely, effectively, and of course, so they're not having crop failures and headaches from that. The government was giving out these licenses, but not telling anybody what safety precautions to take or what a male to female ratio was with the seeds they sold to medical patients, almost setting them up for failure. So we started Cannabis in Canada for that purpose, to educate on not look how pretty the plant is, but here's how you make it look pretty.
Correct, correct, and that's something that so many patients do need is education and knowledge. I know myself when I first got licensed, something like that would have been really handy if I had more knowledge back then on it because I started to learn how to water house plants just to get used to how to water a garden. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so this training has been obviously very good for everybody then.
Well, we're sitting at 11,400 subscribers, approximately 3.7 million views. So if we've reached a few people and helped a few growers get off the ground, then hey, it was all worth it.
That's right. And by those numbers, I'd say you helped more than just a few.
Thanks.
So, um, what about when I was I went through your website and I looked at a few things. You've got a terms of reference listed in there. You mentioned some goals as far as education and what Cannabis in Canada does. You mentioned the video and training. Is it involved in any other kind of public education, like forums or seminars? Or...
Oh, absolutely. When we lived in Abbotsford, I approached the Abbotsford Police Board. That's also online, where I actually approached them about opening a Christian club in Abbotsford. In British Columbia here, Abbotsford is a small town outside of Vancouver that basically is the Bible Beltway, a place where last place you'd expect to set up a shop. To try and help medical patients. However, that kind of went nowhere, so we fell back to being an educational society that continues to empower by collective peer action to take action, to stand up for your rights and lead by example, by setting examples on camera, how to stand up for your rights, and not allow yourself to be pushed around. And with the help of some predominant lawyers, we've been able to make some change.
Well, so not only educating people on how to grow plants, you're also teaching them how to be activists and how to get involved and how to make change.
Yes, also how to protect themselves as medical patients because it is we're working within the confines of prohibition as anybody else is that chooses to use cannabis. And medical patients, as a result of working in those confines, often get blanket policies placed, and then we have to go to the court and knock them down and show justice. And it's just been this ongoing fight for since the inception in 2001 of the program. It's not reasonable
No, no, it's not.
from our standpoint.
Correct. It does seem to be a constant fight. There's always, somebody before the courts and, challenging something and because the government, when they put the program in and it's just been a bare bones program, eh?
Absolutely. Going back to the 2004 National Committee, I sat on there with a few other national activists, and they've since went on to more academic stuff. But certainly sitting on there and reviewing the MMAR back then under the MMAD,
Hmm.
Medical Marijuana Access Division of Health Canada. We reviewed and all the MMAR, and even then, I remember pounding my hand on the table to the Health Canada official saying, one strain will not fix all. PPS will be a colossal failure. And
Oh,
here we are today looking at it as a colossal failure.
big time, big time. That's right. It's as if was it as if they were just going through the motions, so that they could say that, yeah, okay, we did talk to the stakeholders and we did talk to patients, but in the end, they don't really take too much of the advice or suggestions that come their way.
It's funny. It's funny you mention that because in the first round of amendments, as we know, due to court cases, they amended the MMAR several times, but they often had key stakeholders in place, stakeholder committee, as you say. In this round, it appears more and more that it was a very selective group that represented the medical patients and weren't actually as much so. Uh, I don't know how to word it. It seems, I can only say to me, it seems suspicious that there's a lot of people that could have been on that committee. And certainly these proposals that have been proposed certainly wouldn't be laid out the way that they are with the sheer opposition that we see from the country,
Yeah,
from my own position.
correct, correct. Yeah, if they had to listen to the patients more thoroughly and put some seriousness into what they were doing, then they wouldn't be before courts and then battling the
I,
whole time.
on that note, I often try to remind people this is called CG2 public consultations for a reason. There was a CG1 already. Did they listen during CG1 and the thousands and thousands of people, us going to all the expensive lawyers to have letters written and do all the stuff similar to what we're doing now? I mean, the coalition will be writing a letter. We can get into that later, but it's very similar to see us having to go through the same thing again, only now a whole new basic set of regulations that, we believe potentially will present barriers to access to our medication,
That's right.
which has been established by the courts.
It has been. That's right. Um, just onto the CNC again for a second. Is it incorporated or anything? I noticed you guys got a board of directors, some minutes and stuff like that. Did you go the corporation route or?
Yes, we've been incorporated since 2009.
Yeah.
We started off as just an ad hoc educational group. Well, it was really just myself and my ex-partner. We ran the show, really just ourselves. It wasn't hard because it was teaching about growing and educating about what we could. Um, we did have a few different guests on. I interviewed Mark Emery just before he went to jail, and a few other key people over the years during different stages of the medical cannabis development here in BC. I never thought that I'd find myself in a position of defending the MMAR, but in face of the MMPR, I stand steadfast with certain areas that it's not all the MMPR that we oppose, but it's certainly an aspect of it. As far as cannabis in Canada goes, again, it was about collective peer empowerment and collective peer action. And the empowerment was empowering patients not to have failed gardens, and not to feel like they should have to go and go on pharmaceuticals when they didn't want to. If they wanted to grow their medicine, there was a way, and there was a way to get over. I used to call it bully by bylaw inspectors. As you know, they came in, to my house in Abbotsford, and that was filmed. There's a lot of stuff that happened around cannabis in Canada while we were incorporated. Even that address that they hit was a nonprofit society. The first time they hit it, they cut down 21 plants of a 40 something, and John Conroy and I sued them. This is on Cannabis Cultures magazine. You can go there to read any information around that. But there's also, if you Google Jason Wilcox takes on, or Jason Wilcox versus the police, you'll get the YouTube videos around both incidents. The first one, the dates, the timelines. I think I got some of the dates here. I know it started back in May 6th of 2009 when the police cut down the 18 plants, it's interesting to note too that the plants they cut down were the mothers. And they went by my alarm system, which was ADT. My guard dog was somehow restrained and put into a bedroom without any injury, and conveniently, that's where the dog appeared to be. And when I got the records from ADT, there was multiple contacts and everything, but ADT failed to notify me for 20 minutes. So,
Oh,
Yeah, that's suspect when they didn't they didn't. But for me to try and take on someone like ADT, they would just run me in litigation till
Right.
I'm no longer here. So it wasn't worth it for us to try and take on that issue. But what I did do is when I called the officer that left me the happy face on the card, which kind of upset me, and after I seen the damage downstairs, and they said, "We apologize. We didn't realize you were medical." Well, they knew I was medical. I approached the police board a few weeks prior. So, of course, that was their message to say, get out of town.
Yeah.
My message to them was to call John Conroy and sue them. And of course, they settled out. At first, I filmed their officer. One thing I would suggest to any activist out there or any medical patient, if you can afford it, if your cell phone can film, if the police show up in uniform, remember, they're in public uniform. You have a right to film all their action, and you'll see a considerable change in how they talk to you and how they treat you once they're on camera. And they can't seize your camera or take it from you as long as you're keeping a reasonable distance from the officer and not posing a threat. So it's something you may see in our videos were used and successful. In one, winning our lawsuit for 8,000 something settlement out of court. They didn't even want to go to court. I was, I believe, the first medical patient to be paid for plant material. Not for the actions alone of the police, not kicking in the door, not just breaking into my house, but also the plants. I had a botanist do the assessment for the cost and everything, and of course the police were held to account by Mr. Conroy, and they asked me to take the movie down of their officer, admitting to doing it. Absolutely not. I'd rather go to court than take the movie down. The movie's still up, and we got our payout and we closed the case, and that was just one. To follow up that, I was warned in advance that there may be follow up in Abbotsford. So Cannabis in Canada, second time, come under attack for our grow location, for ourselves, for our personal use, for myself and my partner. Came under attack again, well, mostly for myself, came under attack again by the city for a city bylaw. And this was, again, where I say bully by bylaw. The video is on YouTube. And again, you'll see this. The first time I had an urban grower and, Jeff Tech and a few others come over right away, and they seen the damage done. The second time we had it all on film a lot better as they showed up in a caravan of, two police cars. I think it was two fire department vehicles, two city vehicles, a couple unmarked vehicles, and a gang of these guys in outfits coming up to my door. And I'm a medical patient, exposing me to the entire neighborhood.
For sure. Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah. Not right at all. Not right at all.
and that it's funny because you'll see that it's all on record there, but you'll see that I did ask all of the YouTube subscribers. I've never asked for a cent from any of our YouTube subscribers.
Yeah.
Never. It's not about money.
Correct.
And the one thing I did ask him was to send emails to the mayor, and we ended up shutting the mayor's email box down. So much so that in a letter from Kurt Tusaw that was strongly worded, was enough to get them to back off of me. It didn't really help the other medical patients in Canada that are being pushed around by such bylaws, and unfortunately don't realize that the police are really not supposed to be used for municipal bylaws enforcement.
Yeah, exactly. And which they were doing at that time.
By showing up with police. In fact, in the video, I say to the officer suggests that there may be people hiding in my closets or guns in my house. And I looked at the officer and I said, what would make you have probable cause to believe that? I don't have any, he says. It's on the video. Please check it out. Once again, Jason Wilcox versus the police. And this led to the human rights case that still we just recently closed simply because my attorney and myself cannot continue to be drug out, which Abbotsford's doing is they would drag it out in another 5 years if they wish.
Right.
They feel they were justified in showing up. They never came back and kicked my door in like they said they were gonna. At the end of the video, you can hear the one city bylaw officer actually says to me, okay, Mr. Wilcox, we'll just do this the right way and get an administrative warrant. Well, to me, that means, Mr. Wilcox, we're coming back and we're going to kick your door in and make sure your kid ain't in front of the door kind of thing. So this is the kind of crap we face with when I say bad policy in relation to medical marijuana because we're working in the confines of prohibition.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're victims of it.
Exactly.
So is this, you have a legal page at Cannabis in Canada. All this information as far as court cases and all that's all listed there that people could review your situation.
The Cannabis and Canada site, unfortunately, it's funny. My daughter's playing around with it right now with trying to fix it because of the fact that what's going on right now. All my focus has been on the coalition's website and the coalition's focus being a national pan-Canadian movement. It's certainly much larger than my society or anybody in BC. To be quite frank, it's about the country of Canada,
Yeah.
and we'll get into that
We'll
as
get into that. We're moving. We're slowly getting there. Actually, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about was the proposals. What can you tell us about the MMPR versus the MMAR, the way the two of them are?
Well, there's a host of factors that are concerning. Primarily for the coalition, it would be barriers to access our medication, which has been established by the courts that any barriers to access, of course, stand in opposition to the charter. So we believe that certain aspects, we're not challenging all of the MMPR.
Hmm.
We're saying certain aspects, such as the phasing out of personal production and designated growers, may potentially present barriers to access and also potentially infringe on people's Section 7 right to liberty and autonomy. But again, this is more for the courts to and our lawyers to address more thoroughly. There's certainly many other things in the regulations. Backgrounder, a lot of people may have read the regulations and not read the Health Canada backgrounder that is the projections for the regulations. And the projections is $8.80 a gram, plus shipping and handling, plus tax. And if we do a little a little deeper digging, we learn that it gets packaged a certain way, which we estimate the cost to be about an additional $35 just for the package.
Wow,
Again,
35
driving
bucks
just for the
extra,
package.
just for the extra package.
That's if you can afford the medicine.
Yeah,
But again, this is projected backgrounder stuff. They don't
yeah.
put this in the regulations, but
No, no.
It's concerning to me again in the first person as a reader, as a medical patient,
Right.
to learn that, and then to learn that I have to order from a government site, or have it through my doctor or whatever the case, and that it's a set of genetics set by the government standards. Or big business standards. It's something that it becomes very concerning. Expired bags is another issue. Your bag that you order, even though you're legal. So let's just say I ordered a 30-day supply and I got pneumonia. I went in the hospital for 3 weeks because of my illness. I come back out. Technically and legally, I have to now dump that bag because it has an expired date. I have to dispose of it according to their.
Right. Yeah. Good
So that
point. Good point.
that's one of the things that, for me personally, I hope that it is raised in court and that the justice is here. But again, it's stuff that certainly raises concerns.
Yeah.
Uh, you
So,
know,
so I read the regulations there, and they talked about the packaging and labeling, and it has to be tested for THC and CBD levels and stuff like that, eh?
oh
That
yes,
would that would be basically that would become our license, just like a prescription is on a bottle.
exactly, and this is the thing is where the coalition is coming from. It's not whether the federal government should have or a commercial district or commercial business should have a right to have standard FDA approved commercialized standards for dispensing. But when it comes to personally producing what you're going to call or personally cultivating what you're going to use for your medicine,
Yeah.
it becomes more of an issue of autonomy, and then of course phasing out 20,000 plus licenses in favor of a paper project that hasn't been tested in the field. After the colossal failure of prairie plant systems, it's very hard for us to sit back and feel that there's, if anything, there's a lot of medical patients living in fear right now. They don't know where their licenses are going to stand. There's a lot of medical patients being caught in the crossfire of this bad policy
I,
being
I
proposed.
I know from talking with patients myself that they're just questioning, like, you know they're looking at whether they're just going to keep right on growing and try to keep under the radar and um, deal with the consequences, but they don't because they can't afford to go the other route to be able
I,
to buy through a commercial distributor who is basically, like you say, 880 by the time you throw your tax and all these other fees on top of it. You know, the person's paying well more than $10 a gram for this.
I've personally filed. I worked direct on the case with Mr. Conroy, and I've personally filed over 400 impact statements and read these impact statements from across the country, and the resonating, resounding sound 2-point messages: price inflation that may drive cannabis out of range for patients, and removal of the right to produce what you personally cultivate, and having a supporter or a caregiver grow it for you if you can't grow it yourself. Removing those rights, from our standpoint, we believe is going to produce potential barriers to access,
Yeah,
and both because of the cost driving it. I mean, let's be frank here: the majority of medical patients are on disability or fixed
correct,
incomes, so
correct.
they can't afford a 400% increase in cost, when they can grow it for themselves for $1.80 to, whatever. There's different
Yeah,
projections, but I
exactly.
know what I can grow it for.
Yeah, yeah. If a person grows it for, let's say, $2 a gram, they're looking at a five-fold price increase.
Exactly. This is what I mean. It
Yeah,
goes by, different people have different projections. Some people grow for $5 a gram. I believe it comes down to what equipment and experience you have when it comes to cost.
exactly, exactly. The and all that stuff at all. Your ability to grow everything,
Yeah,
and even the strains, really, because not all strains produce the same amount. Some
exactly. Yield
of
is
that.
definitely a factor, and this is where the government, when I tried to explain to them that PPS one strain won't fix all, they wouldn't listen about CBD, CBN, and THC. It was to them what they say, cutting edge science. They've known about this since the 70s. This isn't new.
No,
It's just that now the endocannabinoid system is being talked about, and they really, a lot of doctors have been scared to step up and speak about this because pharmacology stands to lose a lot of business. I mean, I can't draw conspiracy theories. I'm only speaking from my first person on this.
right.
But, certainly it draws a lot of questions as to why doctors would be scared to talk about such a huge discovery, as that system, that our bodies may be predisposed to accept the cannabis plant. Cannabinoids being found in people that don't even use cannabis. I mean, this is stuff that needs to get out and needs to educate, considering Canada, which is ironic. America has jumped ahead of us. Canada doesn't even recognize at any level that cannabis is a medicinal property.
Yeah,
But it's nothing more that's why they moved it in with cannabis. Cannabis is being moved out of Health Canada and in with tobacco decanate as a drug. People just have to look into the total research on this
mm,
and ask yourselves, why would they move it in with tobacco? Again, in my personal opinion, again, taking off my coalition hat,
yeah.
my personal opinion, I think they're moving towards a distribution model that would relate to a tobacco distribution model. And
That's yeah, that's what it looks like.
well, if they were to shift that way and remove personal production, of course, and then people, sorry, back to your point, Al, you made a good point there. A lot of people are just going to keep growing. And I strongly advise people to read Bill C-10 thoroughly and interpret it for themselves, prior to continuing. And then make their decision based on that. There's also Kurt Tusaw's video on Pod TV that people can watch and get a clear understanding from a lawyer's perspective around how it relates to compassion clubs or dispensaries. Just because, again, being a patient activist, I don't want to see any patient have to go through a constitutional challenge, go to jail, go through anything over doing nothing except not understanding that there's been laws passed recently that are the first laws for mandatory minimums for nonviolent crimes. I mean, usually they're reserved for guns, not cannabis.
Yeah,
You know,
six
so
plants sure is not a violent crime. No, cannabis isn't violent at all. It's the laws around it that are violent.
exactly.
Is there any benefit in these proposals for the patient?
Absolutely. I mean, there's the nurses being able to sign. Hopefully when they publish the final regulations, they'll add in Chinese herbalists. Having the doctor being able just to sign a script. Of course, this doesn't fly well with the police, but it should have been this way from the beginning, in my own opinion, in 2001. Then we'd have, the 1.8 million that Health Canada estimates medical users in Canada licensed, and not some 26,000. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. When you see some of the states in the U.S. with their programs, and they can have more people in that little state that are licensed for medical purposes than we can in our whole country. You know,
Exactly.
Like ours has got a benefit because we go from coast to coast, whereas theirs goes from state line to state line. But yeah, they've obviously got a lot more people in their program than what we'll have. So
It's funny though, a lot of American lawyers are in direct contact with the coalition because they're watching what we're doing. They're coming up with public safety concerns. They're trying to fly that in America. They started with land use issues, and they're realizing that that's not going to work. So they're shifting to public safety. So this is where indoor grow tents that are CSA ULA approved, CSA ULA approved ballots, no change to the structure. These are the kind of things where reasonable on patients can be looked at with a framework of distribution, that again does not remove the right for one to cultivate what they're going to personally consume, as long as they're not going to hurt anybody else in the process. And personally, the statistics don't reflect fire, mold, and gangsters that's projected in the proposed regulations as justification for the program.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. The From what I read on those regulations, they did an estimate of down the road, um, something like 20 years down the road, and they actually figured under the new proposals there would be less patients using cannabis than under the present program.
Absolutely. That was just re-released. Jesus, I can't think of the report off the top of my head. That was just released the other day, but our attorney definitely has a copy. It's on page 333, I believe, or something like that. 332, 3,332. Sorry, but anyway, it's deep into the document. But they do definitely suggest that 30%, I believe it is, of patients will basically drop off of being able to obtain their medical cannabis, and this is the government's own projection. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, which they say they're promoting it as supposed to be easier to access, but their own projections show less numbers there.
Precise. This is why we find ourselves going before the justice and not trying to convince the politicians.
Basically, the part that's easier for the patient or better for the patient in this whole program or these proposals would be the fact that they don't have to deal with the government anymore.
Well, that it is a doctor. Well, again, doctors are prescribing something that's not in pharmacology.
Right.
So the U.S. took it out back, I believe it was 1942, off the
Right.
top of my head. They
Yeah.
took it out of pharmacology. It was cannabis sativa. And if we just put it back in there, it would be a lot easier for doctors to then not be so opposed to signing something that's not in their books. It's hard when there's no standardization. There's nothing in how do you standardize something where we know if we take a clone from a mother and put it in two different grow ops, the CBD, THC, and CBN ratios can change based on the nutrients used, the environment growing in. It's like versus indoor versus outdoor. You
Right.
know, it's very complex and needs to be looked at from a scientific standpoint and certainly a true medical standpoint, and not a blanket policy written by somebody who clearly hasn't grown cannabis before
Yeah.
indoors.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Um, do you know of any assistance? Being that the proposals say that this medicine will be for patients who can afford it. Do you know of any insurance companies, any assistance that will be available to patients?
This is again what shocks me is that even with such a drastic proposal that they're making, they're putting all the costs back on the patient. I haven't seen anybody step forward. I can't speak for private insurance, but I certainly know that people on disability in British Columbia and everybody else across the country that I've spoken to, their number one fear is being off of cannabis and having to go back onto heavy narcotics and be gobsmacked on their couch, drooling on themselves, feeling like they have no quality of life simply because of a policy that, in our opinion, stands directly in barriers to access.
Yeah.
And to us, that amounts to bad policy. Blanket policy is bad policy.
Yeah, I agree completely 100% because I am a patient who I'm dealing with Crohn's disease. When I was in the hospital, they had me on morphine drip. When I left the hospital, they gave me a prescription for morphine pills. Um, I took 6 pills and I returned that bottle of pills 3 years later. The only thing I've used since then is cannabis. So by making this medicine unaffordable to me and forcing me to have to go to a narcotic that I hadn't had in 10 years, how is that? That is not a benefit to me in what's in any way.
Exactly, and that's where in the impact statements, that's the biggest thing is people really fear losing their support, their caregivers or DGs from growing their medicine, and they're basically getting it for free. They have deals worked out. They're able to grow for themselves much cheaper, and they have different routes to be able to get it through dispensing models. At least here in BC, some other provinces, of course, don't have that, but certainly don't want to have the cost driven up so high that even if they had another route, whether it be mailing or whatever the route is, until proper policies in place so that we can have this done, it gets very confusing. And the number one thing, as I said, is fear of going back on pharmaceuticals. And myself, being a 20-year terminal patient, I've been on 120 milligrams of morphine 3 times a day, gobsmacked on my couch. But that was because I was sick enough to warrant it. But no, when they told me it would take a year, I did it in 4 months with cannabis. High cannabis concentrations, keeping the cannabinoids up in the bloodstream all day long, helped me get through my withdrawals faster, and kept me keeping out of the convulsions and seizures that would have amounted.
So you used cannabis as a gate out drug, not a
Exactly, not a gateway.
right gateway out, gate out.
Gateway out.
And I've heard that story several times. Actually, for treating yourself, I was involved with an article with a patient who was a heroin addict at one time, and I think it was issue 11. And that's what she did, is that she used cannabis in order to bring her off of the methadone end of it all. And they brought it,
Absolutely.
and then she used cannabis to get out of there. And now she's teaching other patients that are in those. But she attends like classes or seminars with other people that have had addiction problems, and she
Yeah.
talks to them about using cannabis in order to help them out.
Yeah.
So
No,
she's
it's
gone
funny.
full circle, it's great.
Yeah, and in a recent panel talk that I was speaking of for the coalition, we had somebody in the room that was running a recovery house, and of course the recovery house is running under the NN or NA protocol of a drug is a drug is a drug, and we're starting to see a new influx in harm reduction in cannabis being used in concert together in the downtown east side and in other areas of modeling new areas of recovery, because there needs to be a post-recovery aspect. And certainly if cannabis is going to help anybody come off of a hard drug, it's surely going to show more benefits similar to Insight. It's another program, that is very similar to the plight that we seek.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Insight. I know full well what Insight's all about. It's been very successful. So
Once again, John Conroy is the same lawyer that won that's fighting for us now.
good stuff. That's good. It's good to have John helping us out. I've met John a couple times at the expo, the Treating Yourself Expo in Toronto, and he's a good man. So,
Absolutely.
um, one last question on the MMPR. With the patients about to lose their licenses and they're going to these commercial grow licenses, do you know what's involved? I get asked quite often what's involved in getting one of these licenses. And some of these people are people who have like a small grow in their house or something, and they want to be able to supply more patients, and they seem to think that they can apply for one of these commercial licenses.
Well, again, in the background or Health Canada's own projections is that there's only going to be 51 licenses granted in fiscal year 1 and 2. Now, again, it's a projection. It's not it's not set in stone, but it's certainly a concerning projection. And when you add that coupled with, like you said, the product standard testing, which is expensive, the security measures that need to be in place. When you put all this stuff together in packaging and so forth, and having to have a contract with FedEx, I mean, you need to have good credit, good money, all the kind of stuff that people on a disability account don't have. People living on a disability income don't necessarily have the ability, even if we banded together. And I know of DGs and growers from across the country that thought about banding together to see if they could get the money to do this. But the more they look at some of the stuff in the under, it's a little concerning. I mean, what if it was 51 licenses only to be tendered? I'd be concerned about the people who have the money being the millionaires or billionaires in Canada. We certainly got more than 51, and this is a huge cash cow. And a 10-year plan, I believe, is not necessarily just for medical. I believe it's a template for something larger, but that's my personal take.
I sort of agree with you. There is a template there that does look for more of a legal route type thing, because if they're setting these things up, you got to think of maybe a LCBO right now. If you go back when Prohibition ended, and or people were using it for medicine back then, weren't they getting prescriptions for alcohol back then?
Yeah.
And would they have gotten, set up something similar where they got a prescription for alcohol and they go to the alcohol dispensary to pick it up? It's the cannabis, right?
Yeah. Well, it's also on that note, you can, in this country, you can still make your own beer and your own wine for personal
Right.
consumption, but you can't make your own cannabis. I mean, what kind of, after 10 years of saying that I can legally produce my cannabis and I've practiced and done all my studies, done all the stuff I need to do, got the strains that work for me, now all of a sudden, based on a blanket policy that some guy wrote who probably never met a medical grower or user, has written policy that, in my own opinion, is not based on true stakeholder feedback. But that being said, apparently Health Canada did hold a stakeholders meeting, and people went there and apparently did represent the medical community. And certainly I applied for that position myself and got the standard that the rest of my colleagues have gotten, which is, we'll get back to you and thank you for your interest in being on the committee. And yeah, so this is where, were they selective? We can't say. That's, again, drawing conspiracy theories on the government.
Right, yeah, we don't want to do that, do we? Okay, let's flip over to the third topic here, the class action lawsuit. Okay, Jason, I just want to remind you, if there's something that I asked that you can't answer due to legal reasons or whatever, just let me know and we'll just move on from there, okay?
Okay.
All right. Who's basically, you've mentioned John Conroy yourself, who's all involved in organizing basically, you should tell us, I guess, what the name of exactly what this is lawsuit is all called.
It's funny when you talk about the name. It started out, John Conroy, when I went to him with 200 members and a model for the coalition that I felt may be able to raise the money to challenge us if there was a route to challenge it. And he entertained us, I would say, at that point, by opening a trust fund and taking in my information and allowing us to proceed. Once again, it's John Conroy QC being Queen's Counsel, which is an important note, when approaching the federal bench. So, it's sorry, I lost focus there. What was I?
As who's all involved in getting this point? You're just
Sorry, yes,
got trust fund set up.
yes. A trust fund was set up with John, and we grew from 200 to approximately 3,400 estimated users. We have about 2,000 registered on our member registry list. But again, if we include all our Facebook groups, linking groups, and various other groups, unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion around Fight the MMPR through public consultations, CG2, where Health Canada, we hope, will listen to us and give our licenses back. And then there's the coalition's route, which is to go around the politicians and through the justice system, which traditionally has ruled on our side.
So you're basically going at it at two different angles, and you're going with the CG2, which, by the way, stands for
Public consultations number 2.
Okay, and as well as you're going through the legal route as well with the lawyer.
Well, the coalition endorses all efforts through, whether it's through MLAs, petitions, through Fight the MMPR. Ted Smith's group over on the island have done a wonderful job. Change.org has recently united with the coalition by blast emailing 1,000 of their members links to our website to file impact statements to give them knowledge as to what's going on. Because once the final regs are published, we'll all know where we stand.
That's right.
And at that point, hopefully people will see there's only one route left, and that is the legal route,
Uh,
and will not only help with funding, but will help most importantly from patients' impact statements. The funding we hope to get from our supporters.
as far as basically, is there with this lawsuit, what is your goal or your outcome? What are you trying to achieve? Is I understand obviously it would be nice for everybody to keep their grow permits and stuff like that. Is there things that you're looking for to achieve through the lawsuit exactly?
Sorry, specifically, we're not looking to protect people's grow licenses per se. We're trying to protect any barriers that may arise to access our medication,
Okay.
which could directly infringe on one's right to liberty. And this is something that we find concerning. And of course, personal production falls in line with that
Right.
because the direct removal of personal production, we believe, may present those barriers, and it's something that again the judge and the lawyers would need to battle out in the proper venue.
I was just recently talking with an exemptee, and we're trying to figure out what sort of the goal would be or what's the possibility of the outcome. And they wanted whether there'd be a chance that uh, would the patients be able to get their growing equipment stuff back, being that they've some people have sunk a lot of money into this, and then all of a sudden we've gone from being perfectly legal to being illegal, and we've gone from being a good citizen to now we're a criminal in the eyes of the law.
Absolutely. And this is again a lot of impact statements now coming in. DG's, of course, being a little more nervous about sending in any sort of contact information. They and do so. Being a grower, I understand trying to keep private. But when it comes to DGs and their cost, I mean that's damages comes to what our fallback plan 3 of the coalition is, which is should we fail to get an injunction by 2004, March 31st, 2014, certainly we'll be looking at a class action, from that point forward, because we cannot file for class action at any time prior to them becoming in full force.
So this is where the injunction you're shooting for an injunction on this as well in order to
The
stop.
inju- We've already raised the 10,000 for our legal opinion from Mr. Conroy, and it's in the process now of the additional framework and stuff being done. That being said, goal number 2 is another 50,000. Just try and get an injunction amounts to a restraining order on certain aspects of the MMPR, should the judge agree with Mr. Conroy. And if we were to win that and the status quo was to be maintained by the judge, it could freeze all of the MMPR or part of it. It's the judge's call. And at that time, a constitutional challenge would follow, which would probably be, in upwards of another $250,000 that we would need to raise just to protect personal production and cost inflation and barriers to access our medication for medical users of cannabis in Canada.
Now all that money has to come from supporters, patients.
Well, it goes a lot bigger. I mean, if we really dig into this, I mean, if you think about who stands to lose beyond just the patients, the people that supply us, the grow stores, they stand to lose. They have all kinds of. In fact, I know of a lot of different grow stores that bought all kinds of equipment because they thought the new regulations meant a 4,000% increase in people buying personal production, because there's going to be a lot more people with the ability to grow in these grow tents, and now they've got to liquidate
Yeah.
all this stuff if this goes through.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, it's a target group that I can only say that when I say a target group, it's other people over and above. When I say supporters, these are people that stand to potentially have to lose, cut employees, people lose jobs,
Yeah.
revenue, general business, gets cut down, not to mention all of the other stuff that, we've discussed.
Yeah.
But these other supporters, including compassion clubs and everybody else, are definitely all in the same boat in the fact that personal production under the charter, again, if that was found to be sound, the right to cultivate what you're going to consume. If that was found to be sound under the charter, which we believe it already, sort of was, except there was no charge before the courts, it's something that we'll certainly be looking at. Yeah, I got to be careful with what I say there. Sorry.
Yeah. No problem. Understood. Okay. So how can somebody get involved with this? Like, where can they register? Maybe I don't know. Some patients, like we talked earlier, are tight on money, but they still might want to still be able to afford a few bucks, or how to get registered into this.
Yeah, I would just note first that we are in our infancy. We're only 3 months plus in our organization, and having grown so fast and being a national campaign, it's more the organizational part. We're looking into locked boxes and stuff like that to be out at different places strategically located where people can donate, and the money can properly be rerouted to Mr. Conroy. At present, on our website, there's a link that you can click on, a tab that says to donate to John Conroy, and it has his banking information. You can phone the office and charge it. Like you said, a medical patient like myself, every month I charge a certain amount to my credit card, and that goes towards it. It's not much, but as long as that account keeps growing, so does our case.
Okay, so a person could set it up so they could basically say, uh, for example, $10 a month, and that would automatically come off of the credit card if they're a patient who couldn't afford much money but wanted to contribute something. Or if somebody had more money, they could do like a monthly type thing. It almost sounded like what you said there.
Sorry, no, that just to clarify, no, I should say monthly contributions where you would phone in and say how much you wish to contribute,
Okay.
and then they will give you an electronic receipt.
Yeah.
If you go in person to the office in Abbotsford, of course you can get a receipt in hand or mailed to you. And there's different ways, and then of course wire transfers, which are also on our website on how to go about that.
Okay.
To go direct to our trust fund. And again, all this money is in John Conroy's trust. It's not in the trust of the coalition.
Right.
We absolutely have no operating costs. So this is part of the reason we're behind in getting posters and other stuff out, because we have to rely on supporters
Sure.
to publish this stuff.
Yep.
And it's not that we're not producing the documents, it's that we're having trouble getting it published on mass scale for a national campaign.
So people can go to your website for the coalition, and they can donate. They can read all your information, and they can sign up as a member of the coalition at that point.
Yes, by registering on the website, they become a member. They don't have to fill an impact statement to be a member. They can simply send the email the coalition address, and let us know that you wish to be a member. We'll add you to our registry, and you'll be updated accordingly as we proceed. Should we get an injunction and move forward, we can then forward, that kind of joyous occasion. It was pretty joyous, in fact, the fact that we even obtained our first goal, because the first goal was the hardest. How do you convince people, hey, give me $10,000 for an opinion?
Yeah.
There's no case. Just give me the money for an opinion, and we might or might not go to court. That's the hardest part. Now we're saying, hey, we need this money so that we can actually go to court.
Correct.
That's the next level. That's what I mean by goal 2.
Goal 2. Super. Good. Good. Um, let's see what else I've got here. What's all available for people to see at the coalition's website? Do you have videos or anything like that there, or?
There's only a couple. We've recently put up John Conroy's video, which is also hosted on my YouTube channel. Which is also hosted mainly. We're directing everybody to John Conroy's website, because it has a video and an impact statement that goes direct through John's server to John Conroy's office. So people who have confidentiality concerns can certainly file through there and not feel that they're going through Joe Blow from the coalition.
Just dealing directly straight through to John.
Exactly, they have that option to check
Nobody
that
else.
box.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's why we're redirecting everybody to there. And if they still, the form on the site that I've been overseeing will be probably taken down, just so that we don't get any confusion, and it makes it a little easier for filing, because quite frankly, 400 impact statements is a lot to put on letterhead and convert to PDF to make it legal.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. I've seen your talk about across Canada. During a bit of my investigation, I see that you have representatives across Canada. Basically, what is the representatives doing? They promoting the coalition, so on and so forth?
Yeah, we have representatives out of Nova Scotia. We have representatives out of Ontario. Key representatives. They're listed on our website under representatives, I believe, still under support. Sorry. Right now, I'm not looking after the website. It's been handed over to our new technical director.
Right.
So he'll be handling that stuff. So I'm not sure exactly if the reps are listed there still.
So I
Um,
don't know whether they are or not, to tell you the truth offhand, but uh,
we
I
do
saw
have.
it, I saw it there, and then I've seen some emails and stuff. We were talking about representatives, so I was sort of looking at that. What their jobs are as far as getting the word out and stuff like that.
The only difference between representatives and members, to be honest, is really there's the administration committee and other representatives that wish to go up onto a committee. It's
Yeah.
just representatives sign a non-disclosure agreement because they're privy to additional information that regular members may not be. So
Right.
they are legally bound by that agreement. And we also ask them to submit a curriculum vitae, to help us know one another better. And you need to be nominated up to those positions, and that's more for the integrity of the group and to make sure that the integrity of this case maintains strong.
Good. Good. The impact. We were talking about the impact statements, and you may have already answered some of this. Privacy concerns. These ones, do they all go directly to John, or do they?
They all end up on the John Conroy file for the MMAR PPL DPL Coalition Against Repeal. That's John's name.
Right.
We've recently shortened that to just MMAR Coalition Against Repeal. Obviously, for the acronyms aren't 100% accurate, and we certainly it's a long drawn out, which a lot of people don't know what a PPL or DPL is. So we are a coalition against repeal for the MMAR. A lot simpler.
If you heard that little chime there in the background, that was my email coming in.
Okay.
It was a letter from the MMPR.
There you go.
So hey, someone's working behind you there.
There you go.
Um, you talked about there's 400 you got 400 of these impact statements, or you're switching over to PDFs and stuff. Do you need more impact statements, as many as possible? Is
This
there a limit that you want?
we're right now. John Conroy is going to be doing a letter for us on behalf of the coalition to send in for the February deadline, February 28th deadline. And we're going to send that letter in and make sure that it has our stats. We're not going to send in my understanding is we're not going to be sending in the actual coalition statements.
Okay.
Rather just a strongly worded letter from Mr. Conroy and the position of the coalition in relation to some of the things we've spoken about.
Good, good. Um, is there any, I guess, well, there was just the other day, yesterday, there was the MMPR rallies to fight the MMPR. That was, Ted Smith was involved with it at Cannabis Digest.
Yeah.
Anthropology 101. Is the MMPR looking at, through these representatives, maybe holding more rallies or something else along that line?
I can't speak for what I mean. Ted and I are in contact, absolutely, and we've endorsed them on our website and endorsed their movement. Of course, anybody who's taken opposition to the MMPR, like Change.org, we hope to have a similar agreement with other groups. Once the regulations are published, final. To then maybe CC everybody that they have on their database to let them know that, hey, you can go this route. This is the last route left to protect your license and to protect cost inflation, potentially, through the courts.
So the consultation period ends February 28th, right? So where's that going to go after that? Are we waiting at that point for it to be published in the Gazette next year?
Exactly. That's the problem is when they're printing it, the timelines don't match up for when we need to seek an injunction. So it makes it where we need to really get, once this deadline's over and people have nowhere else to submit, we hope that people who've kept copies will just CC over to us through John Conroy's server if that's how they feel safest. However it is, please get the information as detailed as possible, because we may call you for an expert witness or for a patient witness to come and stand up if you so wish, and or we may call you to get additional information to help build a better framework. We want the most strongest case. To be quite frank, if we were to fight a case like this in BC Supreme Court alone, there would be a lot more different results, but it would be binding to BC alone. And when we started this, it's a coalition, a pan-Canadian coalition, so it's going to maintain that. So basically, the federal Supreme Court is where we're headed, it looks like.
So it looks like. That's right. It does. Okay, Jason. Well, we've talked a lot, asked a lot of questions, you've given a lot of answers and a lot of advice. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Would you like to give us the website address of the coalition so people know where to go to?
MMAR, actually, this is easier. Just Google MMAR Coalition Against Repeal, or just MMAR Coalition, and you'll get us. And there will be a link specifically underneath the coalition that will be impact statements, and you can just click on that and go right to the impact stage, and or impact page, sorry. And in our recent press release that's now circling around the net, there's the new link that you'll see to John Conroy's site. That we are on to goal 2, as I mentioned, and the money mentioned in Mr. Conroy's movie, we held back on that movie for over a week and a half. So the accounts, of course, grew over that time period to meet our first goal. But that still, it doesn't.
Right.
Sorry?
No, keep going.
I was just going to say that obtaining the next goal of the 50 grand needs to be a primal focus of the coalition if we truly want to get this before the courts. Okay,
well, we'll do our best to spread the word, let everybody know about what's going on, and see if we can help you out to get that $50,000 in order to get to the next step.
Excellent.
Okay, so at this moment, I'd like to thank Jason for talking to people and educating about this MMPR and the lawsuit, and to you, people on YouTube, for listening to what Jason had to say, and for being people advocating cannabis education.
And thank you for having us on, Al.
Thank you. Thank you again, Jason.
Okay. Bye-bye.